Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. Before I get into today's podcast topic here on episode 374, which is practicing casting, but with a significant twist, one that you can do in the wintertime, one that you can do indoors, I want to go through a few administrative details. The first one is that the website is back up and operational. Now, the website was never down, but emails, the automated emails that go out every week to subscribers, and if you haven't subscribed, you can do so over at castingacross.com. All you get is once a week a digest of the 3 articles, posts, whatever, that come out. It's a direct link to the podcast, to a YouTube video if I put one out, and to the articles. Something got messed up, and the folks at Bluehost were very, very helpful in getting that all straightened out. So that is back up and running as far as I can tell. Of course, tomorrow might bring something different, but that's where we are right now. That's the first thing. The second thing is we are coming very close to some fly fishing shows. If you are listening to this live or in the weeks following, I will be in Marlborough, Massachusetts, and in Edison, New Jersey, presenting at the Fly Fishing Show in 2026. I will be there on Friday and Saturday in Marlborough on January 16th to 17th, and Friday and Saturday in Edison on January 23rd and 24th. If you want the particular topics and times where I am presenting, then you can go to castingacross.com, and they're there. Of course, you can go to the Fly Fishing Show's website. You'll see those there as well. And if you can't make it to one of my presentations, but you want to meet up, I will be doing all manner of other things in those days, so let me know by contacting me both through the website or through social media. Instagram seems to be the most effective and efficient way to communicate in a direct message format. So there you go. All right, well, I'm talking today about practicing your casting. Now, if you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, if you've read the website, you know that I place a premium on really dialing in your casting. And here's why. Whether you're fishing a small stream or a large stream, whether you're fishing for trout or bass or saltwater, you casting really is what makes your presentation work, okay? So even if a fish is dead in front of you and 5 feet deep, you have to cast upstream of that fish at a particular place to allow the weighted fly that you selected in the proper pattern to get down in front of it. So all of those variables, your cast is one of the things you really can control. You can't control all the flies that you have in your boxes. You can't control all the different weights of the flies that you have in your boxes at any given time. I mean, you can prepare and anticipate as much as you can, but you're going to be limited by those flies. You're going to be limited by where the fish are holding on that particular day. You're going to be limited by the river that you are fishing on, but your cast is something you can control as long as it's within the reasons of your physical ability and the amount of line you have. You're not going to cast 200 feet, right? You're not going to be able to have pinpoint accuracy at 80 feet, but you can maybe have pinpoint accuracy at 20 feet. You can have the ability to cast 80 feet if you put in the practice. I'm confident that with enough time, and again, this isn't a ridiculous amount of time. This isn't 1,000 hours. This is just some concerted time, and I think there is a real benefit to having some instruction, some real legitimate instruction, person-to-person instruction with a guide or with a casting instructor. But for a lot of folks, even just practicing themselves, you are going to dial things in pretty well. So casting matters. And I also believe, like I said, in practicing casting. And why is that? We can get distracted when we're fishing. When I teach people to cast, I prefer to start on land. And here's the reason why. When you're casting on water, where there's fish, whether it's just like a bluegill pond or on a trout stream, all of a sudden you're thinking about fishing, which is great, which is awesome, which is what you want. And it's not the worst thing in the world. But when you are practicing, and you're especially a new angler, then you want to take those variables out. Now, there are some things that you can do on water that you can't do on dry land. The tension, the surface tension that you get from the water is essential for so many casts that you're going to make, even some of the casts I'm going to be talking about today. But that said, the basic mechanics of so many of these casts, particularly small stream casts, which is what we're going to be focusing on, can be achieved indoors. And yes, indoors. We'll talk about that in a second. But they can be more than that achieved on dry land, whether it be grass, whether it be a gym floor, whether it be your living room carpet. So casting indoors, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm recording this in January, and it's a mix of snow and slush out in my yard right now. And so consequently, the rivers here are like icy, but at the same time, like thawing out. And so they're high. So there's like water over the ice. And a lot of these rivers that are in my immediate vicinity are not great trout rivers in the wintertime. There's fish in there. They're just not super duper productive. And so I am not going to go casting on a river right now. It's a great way to tear up your line to be casting over ice. And I'm not even going to practice outdoors right now. Ice is incredibly abrasive. This is why, when your guides freeze over, you don't just pull your line through it. This is why you try to get that ice off those guides, because your line is a much, much, much softer material than ice is. Ice is abrasive. If you've ever, slid on ice, it looks smooth, it feels smooth. Part of the reason you slip is because it is smooth, but your skin, when it comes in contact with that ice, there's a lot of friction there. And the same is true for something softer than your skin, which is that nice, slick PVC coating of your fly line. And if your fly line has any sort of compromised portions in it, where there's a kink or where there's a divot or where there's a crack, then this is a great way to exacerbate that problem and really send you into a situation where you have to buy new fly line, which if it's got some of those things happening, you might need to do it anyway, but you don't want to needlessly cause damage to your fly line. So all that to say, make sure you don't get ice on your guides, which we talked about in a podcast a few weeks ago. And also don't practice casting on the snow. So you say, what am I supposed to do? Well, like I said, you can practice casting inside. Now, a lot of the casts that I'm talking about are going to be for small streams. Because, of course, if you have access to a gym, a great example was I attended a church a few years ago where we had a gym, really high ceilings, and full court basketball. And I would go in there and I would practice casting in the wintertime. Very nice to have those lines for all the basketball lines. You have targets. You can see how straight you're casting, things like that. Fantastic. If you do cast indoors, you're going to want to clean your fly line. There's a lot more dirt on a floor than there is even in the water. But we don't all have that access. I don't have that access right now. I don't think if I were to go to the local high school and say, hey, could I cast a fly rod in there? They would say no, but they'd probably give me a couple of limitations. So how can you cast indoors? Well, a lot of my fly fishing takes place on small streams. I'm talking small mountain trout streams. And I know that a lot of you enjoy that fishing also. And so if you think about it, if you have a garage or a 2-car garage, or maybe even 3-car garage, and your ceilings are 9 feet tall, maybe even just 8 feet, or maybe you have a higher ceiling in your garage. I have an exceptionally tall garage ceiling. But that space that you're operating in is not that dissimilar to a pool that maybe has a significant amount of riparian coverage on the sides, or maybe even a canopy over the top. And if it's on a gradient, you're limited in where you can backcast. So you're not going to be able to haul off a 20-foot cast. But what you can do is focus on learning some very intricate skills of manipulating your fly line and getting that accuracy at that 10-foot range, where you maybe don't even have that much of space for a backcast. So what am I ultimately getting at here? You can get in your garage, pull your car out, and you can sit there. And I would actually encourage you to sit there or do it on your knees. I know not everybody's going to want to do that, but put down a towel or whatever, get down on one knee, get your 7-foot fly rod, and make bow and arrow casts. Practice that. Throw a bucket out there. Try to nail having that accuracy, because I think that's one of those skills that we have, but we are really hoping one of two things: one, that we get it right the first time, or two, that we have opportunistic trout that we are fishing for, and they're not going to care that much about the precise placement of that fly. But consider even a good sized trout stream that's up in the mountains. It's a small mountain trout stream, but is a decent size. A lot of times you need to put your fly in a precise location, because that pocket, even if the stream is maybe 20 feet wide, if that water is moving well, that fish is holding in a spot that's maybe the size of a hula hoop or smaller. And even if that pocket is a hula hoop size, then maybe a particular quarter of that is where you need to put that fly, so it has a chance to sit for a second and allow that fish to even immediately go and get it before it experiences drag and gets pulled away. So you can go through the motions of those casts and really dial in how your rod and your reel work, your rod and your line work for making that bow and arrow cast at 15 feet. And yeah, there's going to be obstructions, but there's going to be obstructions on the water. So you want to take all of the variables of being able to move in any sort of way you want, to be able to orient your rod in any particular direction that is convenient for you. You want to be able to dial in doing it all around the clock, having it over your offhand shoulder. So if you're right-handed, over your left shoulder, then up at a 45, and then maybe vertical, and then a 45 towards your right hand, your casting hand, and then and all the way off to kind of sidearm to your right hand. And you can move around and be able to find that space. So I'm thinking, the nose of your car goes, the front bumper of your car goes, you're sitting right there, and you're aiming towards where your car is just pulled out, and you are now almost like shooting around the world from a basketball hoop, only in reverse, where you're in a set position, but you are now moving your rod tip from your left all the way to your right, aiming at a target, putting the target to your left, putting the target straight in front of you, putting your target to your right as you're looking out of your garage. I mean, this sounds ridiculous. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm not advocating doing this as an essential step. I just think this is a great way to practice casting. Another thing you can do, and you've probably seen this if you've been on fly fishing retailers' websites or seen them in the catalogs, but they have these practice casting tools. I think you see them. Orvis has them, Sage has them, a couple other manufacturers make them. All it is the top section of a fly rod with some yarn on it. You can use the top section of a fly rod, and you can use a little bit of fly line pulled through it, or you could use yarn. But every time I've done this, I've used the top section of like a 2-piece fly rod, so it's anywhere between 4 and 5 feet, and I'm in my desk, and all I'm doing is little roll casts. Or I can, shoot. I'm sitting at my desk right now, and the room I'm in my office is probably 14 feet by 10 feet. And here I can haul a short back cast to my left, even though I'm only about 7 or 8 feet from my window, and then I can shoot out line, and I can aim at particular spots. To my right, I have an open doorway that actually goes into a machine room where I can cast a little bit further. I have a space between 2 bookshelves that's kind of at my 3 o'clock. And then in front of me, I've got a spot under my desk. And I can sit here and I can pop little casts into each one of these spaces. And what that does is it shows me, okay, I am applying too much power and it's doglegging to the right. I'm not applying too much power. I'm being too lackadaisical in my application of power. And my line is whacking the bookshelf as opposed to getting in between the 2 bookshelves. And all this is little simple muscle memory training when you are unable or maybe not super excited about getting outside. So that's option 1 is getting in the garage and making those bow and arrow casts, making those little roll casts. Again, you're going to want to clean your line after you do this, of course. Option 2 is getting into a space. It could be your garage, could be your office, could be your great room, could be your basement, where you can maybe just desegment that fly rod and use 2 sections and make quick casts. It's remarkable how much you can do with 2 sections of a fly rod. I don't know if I've told the story before on the podcast, but there's one particular bridge on a spring creek that held trout underneath it all the time. And because of the junk that accumulated against the bridge abutments, and because of the height of the bridge, it was only maybe like 2 feet above the surface of the water. It was very, very difficult to get a drift that went underneath there. The currents swirled, and it was a perfect place for trout to hang out. So to get underneath that bridge, you either had to really skate a fly from upstream, which was a great way. And I caught some fish from doing that. But then there's other situations where the current was so wonky that even skating a fly would probably line a fish, and so I had to get from the downstream side and I had to cast from underneath. Now, if you've ever tried to do this, try to place a cast with accuracy when you have that maybe 8.5 foot, 9 foot fly rod, when you are casting with that rod almost parallel to the water. And you can't come at it from an overhead angle. You can't kind of loop that line in, but you actually have to keep that line within 18 inches of the surface of the water. It's not easy to get accuracy. And so I was standing there kind of troubleshooting it with another guy that fished, and he's like, well, why don't you just take the first 2 sections off of your 8.5 foot rod? So I did. And I was able to get that much more accuracy, putting that fly where it needed to go. Now, I didn't catch the fish in the first or the second time I tried it, but I think after a couple of days of trying this method, I was able to get that fly right where I wanted using just the top 2 sections of my 5-weight, and I was able to, catch that fish. So what that says is you don't need that full length of that rod to work on some of those mechanics. Now, is it going to be different with your, top 2 sections versus your full rod? Absolutely. But a lot of it is what is really feeling how that line works with the flexing of that rod. So, none of these manufacturers built the top 2 sections to be to operate independently from the other ones, right? They built it to work all together. But if you can dial in the feeling of that line on a traditional cast like that, even though it's sidearm, it's still a traditional cast. If you can dial that in, you understand the flex of what that line is doing to a rod and how you have to respond appropriately. That's where it's different from something like a bow and arrow cast, or even maybe something like a roll cast, which is a lot more rod and line specific. Now, there is a feel component that goes in, and you do need to know how that line makes that rod load. With any of those situations, that's why I encourage you earlier to get out there and practice doing your bow and arrow cast, practice doing roll cast, practice doing just kind of flip casts and things like that in your garage or indoors. But if you were to take off the 2 top sections of a rod, you're essentially honing in on those same skills that you use when you are out and you are casting with a full rod. Something else I'd encourage in both situations, and I mentioned already, is never just practice standing still. I mean, think about how many times you're fishing a small mountain stream and you are standing completely upright with your hips facing your target. It happens sometimes, but it is not the most common thing in the world. You want to practice being down on one knee. You want to practice casting over your off shoulder while on one knee. You want to practice casting, maybe even sitting down. I'm sure you've seen NFL quarterbacks show off their arms by, throwing, 50 yards from their knees or whatever. It's a similar thing where you are, yes, taking away one of your most valuable assets for casting, your core and your hips. If you're casting for distance, if you're casting for accuracy, if you are, trying to put that bonefish fly right in front of that fish on the flat's nose, then you want to use your hips. But on small mountain trout streams or even medium-sized trout streams, you might not have that opportunity based upon the topography, based upon some of the obstructions that are in the water, or maybe even overhanging branches. And that's where, really limiting your space makes you focus on using the appropriate muscles in your arm, which again, a nice ideal cast isn't going to be super wristy. But you and I both know that when we are casting in those small mountain streams, it may require a flip of the wrist. But of course, you're going to have your forearm engaged, you have your bicep engaged, your shoulder, and to a certain degree, your core engaged. So what you're doing when you're casting indoors, you are limiting those options. Now, again, ideal situation is that snow thaws out, that ice goes away. You can go outside and you do all of these things also, but don't allow that to take away those self-imposed limitations that more accurately represent the casting circumstances you will find yourself in when you're on your particular river. So another example, this is taking it from the small mountain trout stream to the seacoast. So one of the things that I always just am completely baffled by is how I deceive myself and how easy it's going to be to cast a 9-weight out in the surf up here in New England. Thinking, okay, there's nothing around me. All I got to do is walk out there and cast. But then every time I get out there, I remember that I am using my quads and I'm using my hips to stay upright while I am balancing on, really, really slippery rocks, even though I've got my cleats on my waders. And so what ends up happening is that I'm using those muscles that I would usually use to haul off a 70 or 80 foot cast. I'm using them to stabilize myself. And so I can't rely on them. So what do? When I'm practicing casting my 8-weight and my 9-weight, I do it from a chair. I do it from a kneeling position. I try to really get to the point where any muscle I get from my quads or from my hips is kind of bonus. So I want to know how to cast that way because that's the best way to cast. But I also want to make sure that I am not trying to muscle a 70 or 80 foot cast with a 9 weight and a big, 1/0 weighted clouser using my wrist only. I want to make sure I am engaging not just my wrist, but my entire arm, as well as kind of the upper part of my core, my chest muscles and things like that, my shoulder muscles, not in a way that I'm going to be dead after a few hours of casting, but I'm able to really make sure I have the endurance to make those casts over and over again if I am unable to engage the lower part of my core, my hips, and my quads when I'm casting out in the salt. And so again, getting down on one knee, sitting in a chair isn't just for the kind of practice that you would need to do to be better prepared for going up into the mountains. It's the same kind of thing that can really benefit you as you are anticipating making those longer casts. I would say the same thing is if you don't like standing up in a boat, or you have a boat that is not great for standing up in. My canoe, I can stand up in it, but if the water has any sort of chop on it, I don't like doing it. And so if I'm casting longer casts for whether it be bass or for trout, I am not going to be able to have that kind of flex that you're going to get if you're leaning up into a casting platform on a drift boat, or if my boat is more stable. And so what do I need to do? Cast from a sitting or a kneeling position. And I need to be able to do that before I get into that situation and there's that fish rising in front of me. All right, so all said and done, what are we talking about? We're talking about really taking away some of your tools so that when you can't use them, you're still functional with your cast. And when you can use them, you can still cast well. You can still put that fly where you want it to, but you also are prepared for if circumstances or conditions dictate, you're able to make those casts in a way that you're not going to be too handicapped. So, any other thoughts on this? Again, you could go out and buy that $250 practice casting device, or you could just take those top 2 sections of your fly rod and see what you can do. Any thoughts on this? Any ideas? Let me know. Matthew@castingacross.com. This week on the website, first article is called 12 Fly Fishing Resolutions. This is a bit of a humorous article in which I make 13 resolutions that are a little bit silly, but I think reflect the kind of things that we do think about in fly fishing. Wednesday's article is called Trout More Than Bears. This is a little short story based on a true story about some people's interactions in the woods. The names and identifying features of the anglers in questions have been changed to protect their identities. This week's recommendation on the podcast is the Lidrig Stash Tray. So this is a cool little clip that goes on the brim of your hat, goes on the strap of your waders, goes wherever you want it to go, and has an incredibly powerful magnet that will hold your flies. Now, I've used a lot of magnetic fly holding devices over the years, and I have to say, I think I like this one the best. It is the most secure that I've used that doesn't involve a pin, and even with that, it holds on probably better than a lot of pins would because of a high tension clip. And then the magnet itself is very, very strong. I like how there's a lip on 3 sides of this so that it has a little bit more security, but then you can also slide things off that 4th side. There's a little hook sharpener in it, which is awesome. I think that everyone should always carry a hook sharpener, especially if you fish fine wire hooks or if you fish streamers. Those are both flies that I think require touch-ups after you've been fishing for a while. It comes in gold, blue, silver, and black. I've got a couple of them. Got one in blue, got one in silver. My son keeps his on his hat all the time, and it's a great little conversation starter for him. But I'll put a link for the Lidrig Stash Tray over on the podcast's show notes on castingacross.com. And if you have any questions about this product or any of the products I recommend, of course, always reach out, Matthew@castingacross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.